Credit risk and credit derivatives. So first up, let's make sure we understand the basics of the major credit derivatives out there. Total return swap versus a credit default swap. We're being asked here to label the payment arrows and indicate which party faces the credit risk of the reference obligation. All right, so actually the credit risk one is relatively easy to see. Well, I shouldn't call it easy to see, but credit risk is borne by the party that needs to make a payment if there's a credit event that plays out or if there's some credit losses. So that's not the protection buyer. It's over here. This protection seller is always the party that's taking on board credit risk. It's always going to be over here, as we'll see. Under a total return swap, it's the total return on a bond portfolio that gets transferred from left to right. So the credit protection buyer is saying, look, if I pass to you the returns of a bond portfolio, so if there's losses, I'll pass them on to you. In return, will you pay some cash flow? And the credit protection seller says, yes, I will. I'll pay just a fixed interest rate. So there's a fixed leg going from the credit protection seller and the total return on a reference bond portfolio or obligation going from left to right as we look at it there. So the idea is maybe there's bond portfolio here that's being held by the credit protection buyer, and they're using this to hedge. They're saying, I don't want this return for a bit. I'm worried about it. Let's pay it over to somebody else, credit protection seller, and in return, they will just pay us a fixed interest rate, essentially. It's just a fixed short-term interest rate. Under a credit default swap, notice the arrows have changed around here. Just be careful with that. The credit protection buyer pays over the CDS spread, all right, the swap premium or the CDS spread or the CDS price or the CDS premium, all different names for the same thing. And in return for that premium, they get back a payment on a credit event or a trigger event. Okay, trigger event, as does Asda. Asda is a supermarket chain in the UK. It's a bit like saying Walmart instead of Wall Street. So ISDA, the International Securities and Derivatives Association, is the body, the industry body for OTC derivatives, and they have 7 trigger events that they give out as standard. Now, these contracts need to be negotiated between parties. The types of credit events that go into these policies are things like, obviously, bankruptcy, failure to pay, because you don't immediately file for bankruptcy if you fail to pay your obligations, technical breach of a covenant, a restructuring which harms bondholders, a government claiming that they don't owe debt. These are the sort of things that are specified by ISDA as trigger events. Okay, so credit risk is on the right-hand side. We said that at the outset. This credit default swap, it's really just bond insurance, isn't it? You're just paying over a premium to get protection against something happening. All right, let's see a CDS in action. In reviewing its credit exposure, an investment bank has decided it's too much exposure to client X. So they've lent too much to client X, or they do too much business with client X, and they're worried about client X going under. In order to hedge that, or they're worried about what happens if client X gets into trouble. So in order to hedge that, what they do is they buy protection. All right, they buy protection with a counterparty. They find a hedge fund as a counterparty. They enter into a 5-year CDS with a 150 bips credit spread and a size of 50 million. Okay, so with the reference asset here is one of X's senior unsecured bonds. So the investment bank's saying, right, I need to get a payment if X defaults on their debt, in other words, gets into bankruptcy issues, and the payment that I will get will protect me against losses